Good afternoon or good morning, or good evening, wherever you are watching. My name is Lauren Enders Gonzales. I am a speech language pathologist with almost 30 years of experience in the field, as well as specifically working with people with considerable communication needs and often using AAC. So our session today is called Words Matter. I'm going to be exploring the effects of our words on learning outcomes for AAC users. So buckle up. It's some of the things that I will share are a little surprising, but I will say that the things that I'm going to share, I think, make a massive difference in the outcomes that you can support with your children, your clients, your students, whoever you're working with. So there is a handout. You can scan that QR code if you like, or I believe there might be a link in your chat. And this is just a live link to the slides that you're seeing today. So I only made 2 learning objectives because I think they're kind of big ones. So the first objective is to describe something, a fact that you learned today in this webinar that surprised you or made you rethink how you support an AAC user. So whether that's your child, your client, your student, somebody you support, somebody that you love, whoever they are, just be able to say something that surprised you that was new. The second objective is to kind of restate a question or direction that you typically ask or give to an AAC user, but using more supportive and motivating language. We're going to talk about exactly what that language should look like to reduce anxiety and support language development. So today's why is that our language drives perception, meaning the way we talk to AAC learners, or actually all language learners. It's not specific to AAC learners, but AAC is like learning another language, and it's a language that's foreign to us, so it's harder. So the why is that the way we talk to and about AAC users very much shapes the perception around us of the public, of other people in the AAC users world, their perception of that person's ability. So we're going to talk a lot about using the right kind of language to project a positive outlook. So it's the same kind of thought as, you don't want to say they can't do it, they're not doing it yet. Things like that, because it really does paint a different picture. And when we speak to or about or use descriptions about an AAC learner, our words shape the perceptions of all kinds of people, of administration, of staff, if it's school, of families, of peers, of teachers, of community members, policymakers, which is really important, and therapists, of course. So my personal why is I started sharing information about the words we use and how words matter, particularly after working with a young lady named Morgan, which I began working with her during the height of the pandemic, and then several students after her. But I also realized that that picture on the left, that is me and my younger daughter, Sam. She's now a junior in college. She's a very bright young lady, but she definitely has some, unique personality traits and is neurodivergent. And I realized that when I applied the changes that I was learning with Morgan and Zach and Gavin and Chase at home with my own typically developing daughter, though, neurodivergent, there was a dramatic change even in our relationship. So I really, really believe strongly in the things that I'm going to share just in general for building relationships. And building relationships is what we really need to do. So our first challenge is that most of us have been taught to describe an AAC user using weakness or deficit-based language. So weakness-based or deficit-based language is language focused on what the AAC user can't do. And this is really kind of the way that our world works in general. We identify the weakness, we identify what they can't do, we identify what's not happening, and then we set our goals and we work towards them. So there might be a statement like, he has a limited attention span. And you'll see there's a little graphic at the bottom that says what we do. I want to assure you that all of these types of statements and the language is something that is globally used. It happens in every country. It happens in every setting. It's kind of the way the world is working right now. So this is going to be a bit of a bold challenge, but I know that you are all up to this. If I could do it, if I could kind of swap my language out and change it, I think anybody can. So he has a limited attention span as an example. He shows no motivation to use his AAC is another example. Her intellectual disability prevents her from participating in social conversations. He has poor social skills. So what these things do is they end up reflecting assumptions about that person's limitations or things that they are not competent in. And it kind of gives a suggestion often that they're not going to be competent. But what it's not doing when we just focus on the weaknesses, what it's not doing is reflecting any of their strengths. And it's not using inclusive language, which is something I think we all need to start doing so we talk about AAC users in many places with many different people. So it's, of course, we talk about our children or our students in conversations with family or in reports, whether we take somebody for an evaluation. It could be just a conversation with a professional, a therapist. But what we do is we talk about AAC users, unfortunately, many times in front of them and don't realize we're so focused on helping, on getting that information to that professional or sharing that information with that family member because we're afraid they're going to melt down and we want to give that information. But the challenge is when we have somebody who has limited expressive communication, it's very difficult to ascertain what exactly they are understanding. And what I have learned in my long career is that almost always that individual is understanding more than we think they are. So, whoops. Okay, yeah, I was done. Sorry about that. All right, so if we use, on the other hand, if we switch and instead of focusing on what's missing, what's a deficit, what is a weakness, if we switch to using strengths-based language, not only does it describe them and their goals in the context of what we know they can do, it projects a different picture to them and to everybody else of well, there's all these awesome things that they can do, and maybe we can build on these rather than always focusing on um, can't, which is pretty much what we do. So I want to assure you that if you are finding any of these examples familiar because you speak that way, I would say you could join the rest of the world because most people do. But you absolutely can make little shifts that really warm our conversations about and with AAC users or anybody else. It's gone the wrong way. Ah, so what this is all about is I think that we can launch momentum in the right direction for AAC users and ourselves, whether we're parents or professionals or support staff or other communication partners. And this recipe, it says recipe for success, mix well, and then there are 3 ingredients. When I read this, I realized that what I had changed when I worked with students one-on-one during the height of COVID, what was different that I was doing than what maybe the rest of their team was doing that I noticed had a real effect were these 3 things. So I was super excited when I saw this graphic on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it. When I saw this graphic on Twitter from Julie Woodard, and it's mix well, empathy. So when you understand and share the feelings of other students or children that making them feel loved and cared for and valued, your energy. I think that we're all very, very tired and life is really, really hard. And there's so much load, physical and mental load, that in many cases, the person that's supposed to be learning is feeling the weight of that load. If we can kind of inject a little bit more energy, if we pay attention to strengths, if we notice little changes and we get excited, that excitement transfers to them. And then when they're excited, it transfers right back to us. So I noticed with myself that when I was working with students and I was kind of had more energy and more interest, they did better, and it kind of ping pong back and forth. So we need to be empathetic. So we always want to be thinking about, we don't know what's going on in their body, in their head. There are all kinds of sensory issues. There are all kinds of, there's trauma. There's all kinds of things that can affect how someone communicates or how someone behaves. And I think if we start from a place of empathy, knowing that, it could be way more than we know of, I think that's a good start. We want to up our energy level because they respond. So a lot of times I'm noticing that when people are working with their children or their students or their clients, it's not so fun and there's not much energy. And I will tell you that in my own experience, and in my experience watching, other folks, whether they be family members or clinicians or teachers, is that your energy level will come back to you from the communicator. And then the last one is something that I definitely see kind of fits with my personality, which is exhilaration. And that kind of comes out of the empathy and energy. So when a family member or an educator or a student, anybody has a feeling of great happiness and excitement, the AAC learner can kind of feel that passion and joy and be empowered to want to learn. So these seem maybe kind of abstract, but I believe that a mix of empathy, energy, and exhilaration does incredible amounts, even if you were not to change what you were doing that much. If you are seeming interested and empathetic and energetic and exhilarated by your interaction with them, what you're providing with them is what all humans need, which is connection. And it's something that many individuals with complex communication needs who require the assistance of AAC are just missing terribly. They haven't kind of felt that connection, that deep relationship. And without that, it's disjointed, and we may have all kinds of effects, including behavior, things like that. So the genuine addition of these ingredients to your interaction, your learning design, your whatever it is that you're doing with an AAC learner is likely to yield greater success. So yes, the way we describe AAC users to others and with others definitely has a big impact on how people form initial judgments, set goals and expectations, and interact with AAC users. So for example, if I was standing with an AAC user and it was someone, let's say that was autistic and had some significant behaviors when they were dysregulated. If I said, "Oh, well, if he does this, if he starts to scream," and I started explaining, what they do, and I am kind of setting up an expectation that, like, you better watch out for this person, and we're not expecting a whole lot. They hear that. And it has way more effect than we ever realize. But there's a second challenge. So have we really thought about how we talk to our AAC users? And this is where I really want to focus today. This is a graphic that I actually created myself. There's a really cool app called Shape That, where you can create word clouds, but you can import graphics. So it was a little sad in that I was importing a dejected, sad child to make this, but I thought it spoke volumes, because if you look at the examples here, this is what we say globally to AAC learners. Ask me for more, say I'm sorry, what's your name, touch your nose, find chip, how many, touch go. That's not a cat, that's a dog. Say more goldfish, please. Ask, use please or you're not going to get one. All of these kinds of things are pretty much what we say all the time. And they don't really go away as an AAC user gets older. We're still saying them the same way. So in my experience, which is almost 30 years in the schools, full-time, working as a speech language pathologist and an augmentative communication consultant, what I found was these types of statements or questions never changed regardless of the age of the child, because I was working in a pediatric kindergarten to the end of high school, 12th grade. They never changed. What I was hearing in kindergarten is the same thing I'm hearing spoken to an AAC learner when they're about to age out at 21. So this is a challenge because it is so firmly ingrained in just what we've always learned to do. But what I want you to do is that empathy part that was the beginning of our recipe is put yourself in their position in your mind. And if you were being told, what's your name? Find chips, say potty, use your words. What's this? Tell me this. How would you feel? Would you want to communicate? And I know that from my own perspective, when I put myself in their position, the first thing I would do is run. I would run away. And I don't mean necessarily elope and physically run, but I would do whatever I could to escape that situation because I would definitely be very uncomfortable with what you see, which is really just a whole array of demands. So the words we choose and how we say those words when talking to AAC users absolutely matter. They matter big time, and that's going to be our focus. So a lot of the time, we tend to be issuing directions or asking questions or correcting AAC learners. No, it's not that, it's this. Or particularly think about those who are autistic when we ask whether it's an academic question or a social question, and they respond with something else, whether it's a script, something that they saw on TV, whether it's something that's seemingly unrelated. And then we have this tendency to correct them. Those things, you can see the faces are looking like, if again, you put on your empathy hat and put yourself in the position of that learner, if it was you, would you be motivated to interact and communicate if somebody was constantly telling you what to do and firing questions at you, and especially firing questions? One of the things that we have gotten into a pattern doing with our children and our students is that we ask questions that we know they know the answer to. So if you step into that really empathetic thought pattern, if you were sitting there and someone said, "What's your name? What color is this?" Imagine the language that might be swirling around in your head that you would like to say to that person who was testing or correcting. If a learner says, if you said, "What color is the sky?" and they said green, many people, their first instinct is, "No, the sky is blue." No, that's not right. But you've pretty much just shot down a communication attempt, and we don't realize what a big effect that can have on somebody's willingness to communicate. Well, why would I want to try if I'm going to be told, "No, nope, that's not right. You have to say it this way." So these are things that we all do. It's global. But what we want to head towards is more statements and invitations to communicate than our typical giving directions, asking questions, correcting. So let's dive in. So what we're going to be exploring today is declarative language, which is kind of a big word, and it's not so important that you know declarative language, but what is important is that you learn what it's about and what it looks like and how you can use it. So declarative language, rather than asking a question or testing or retesting known information or posing a demand, all those examples that I was giving you that were in that the word cloud graphic, they were demand-based. They were imperative. But here we're going to be talking about if we can switch our language to more making statements or making comments or just inviting communication, the change can be really dramatic. Not overnight, because we have to build trust and we have to build a relationship. But when we start to invite somebody to communicate rather than require that they communicate. And they don't feel that anxiety, that push, I have to answer, and there's a right or wrong answer. We can see enormous changes. So you may be thinking, well, wait a minute. That's what I always do, like 100% of the time. And I will tell you that you are not alone. Just about everybody is doing that. Tell me, Chip. Ask for what do you want for lunch? It's the way that we have all kind of grown up and learned to adult and to support children or support others who need our help is kind of on the authoritative side. And again, in each case, think about how you would react to that kind of interaction. And I think that makes the challenge of shifting your language to be more inviting and less demanding, it makes it a little bit easier. Because if you're constantly thinking, oh gosh, what would I think if that were me? That was something that helped me enormously. So this is Linda K. Murphy. She is a speech language pathologist in the United States. She wrote two kind of small workbook style books, which I think are very, very helpful. I think they're easy to read. I think they're $9.99 US dollars on Amazon. I'm not sure exactly, what they are worldwide, but inexpensive little handbooks that are practical, useful, and concise, and really talk about the concepts that I'm talking about today. So I just want you to know that that is a resource. So there's the declarative language handbook, and then she also wrote the co-regulation handbook, which really go hand in hand and are both excellent. So what I want to do is encourage you, let's think about the words we use with AAC users. So rather than tell me, Chip, use your talker, tell me again, any of those kinds of things, like I saw you smile. I wonder if you are happy. And that's where the modeling comes in. My guess is that if you're attending this session, you've probably attended at least a few others in the past about AAC, and you may have heard the term modeling. Modeling is what we all do when we learn language. We do it for our typically developing children, no matter what country we're in, what culture. We model and they learn. Modeling is a little trickier when it's AAC because we are not speaking with AAC all the time, but there's nothing more powerful than modeling. So what I have found is just by using a device and having that empathy and enthusiasm and exhilaration, that after a few sessions, I'm noticing my students or my clients are independently, sometimes these are students that are 19, 20, 21, that pretty much all their lives there's been language saying they can't do this. Yeah, they don't use AAC, they're not motivated, they can't push a button. I've now had kind of a string of students or clients that I've worked with where that ends up being completely false. And what the challenge was that they didn't have anything to rise to. And they were just being tested all the time. So the words we use with AAC users, what our body language says, this is even something, life is hard. The requirements of adulting are hard, and there's no getting around that. And sometimes there's no getting around that kind of showing on our face when we're just really frustrated. But if we can even make small shifts to show our interest and our desire to communicate with someone through our body language, leaning toward them, really looking and listening. One of the things that I think made the biggest change in my interaction with AAC users in the last few years, and again, I've been doing this for almost 30, I really feel that I didn't get it. I didn't do it the way that it should have been done until around 2020. That I was doing the same kind of testing, asking questions, sometimes asking questions that I knew that they knew because they've answered that before, but I'm asking again. So all of those things. But what I realize is that if I kind of lean in and I pay attention to what they seem at all excited about or even upset, and I then talk about it. I acknowledge. When you acknowledge someone and you validate even what you think they're feeling, it makes a huge difference. So I think that our words, our body language, having problems with mine, and also the types of questions we ask. Again, go back to that say chip, ask for bathroom. What are the three kinds of rocks? What's up in the sky? Touch your nose. Can you touch your nose? These kinds of questions, when we ask them, they know there is a correct answer in our minds. They know. And often when we work with somebody with significant communication needs, variety of disabilities, a lot of times there's a lot of anxiety associated with interactions because they know that they are not at the level that we are in terms of expressive language. So imagine if you were talking with someone and you knew that they were a genius and you had to talk with them about a subject that you knew that they were good at. How would you feel? You might worry, oh, I'm going to get it wrong. Like I'm going to say something. They're going to know I don't know. I really think this is what happens with AAC learners because they're starting out with a kind of more anxiety, and then we tend to fire questions nonstop or give directives. So the power that we wield with our words, our tone, and our action is massive. I have no idea why it's going backwards. Just in case you didn't see it the first time, I think this illustrates it a little better. And that is, if you think about us and the way that we are talking to, and it's not just AAC learners, we do this with all learners. And I think there's something to be said about that. We want to build these positive relationships with everybody. So these are not really suggestions that I would say specifically are for AAC learners. I think they're for all learners and all relationships. However, because AAC is really hard, I think that us using language like these, assigning, deciding, demanding, testing, asking, bargaining, prompting, distracting, rewarding, taking away, if we focus on those things and it's really hard, there's not a whole lot to develop motivation wise because they're all kind of, not fun. And what happens is often pretty quickly on their side, they're like, nah, nope. So you might have somebody elope, you might have behaviors that are challenging to manage or deal with, all kinds of things. But it may be stemming from the fact that the kinds of language you were using were stressing them out. I know I've done it. So imperative language is just a fancy way to say questions or sentences that demand a response. So it either demands a verbal response or a language response using a form of AAC or an action. So all the examples that I've been giving you, tell me chip, there's a verbal response required or a language response. What color is this? There's a verbal response. Put on your shoes. That's an action. All of these things, I really believe that we do all day long. Imperative language with demands. And we are demanding either a response with language or some kind of action. This is the biggest challenge with that kind of language. If they know that there is a right or a wrong answer, and with all of these kinds of questions, there usually is, what color is the sky? What did you have for dinner last night? Tell me what you did at the playground yesterday. Even when it's about a fun topic, when we pose things where they are directions or questions with an answer, AAC learners or any kind of language learner, they know that there is some right answer that you're going for. And sometimes the anxiety that builds in trying to get to the correct answer to make you happy is extensive, and we don't know that. And then that can kind of snowball into all kinds of other things like behaviors, eloping, all those kinds of. So yikes. So much of our AAC user directed language tends to be demand based. I wonder if you're guilty of that communication style too. I know I definitely am, and I don't know anybody that isn't. This is just kind of the way we've been taught to interact with people who need our support. But guess what? So they know that they'll either be right or wrong. So again, let's take that empathy and let's step into their position. If you were asked a question and you knew there was a right answer that they were looking for, but you really weren't sure what you were supposed to say, how would you feel? Would you want to communicate? Would you want to continue that conversation? And I would argue that in many cases, AAC users absolutely know that there is a target in our heads, and that they'll be either right or wrong. And for some, or for many, the fear of being wrong is just too much. So it appears that many neurodivergent individuals are highly sensitive to physical, emotional, social stimuli. It's thought that they tend to pick up on needs and feelings of others, and that they hate letting people down. This is not something that we think of. I have a really great example. So this was an article that I wrote 2017, so way back when. But I was interviewing an adult AAC user. And what she said was, my brain and mouth don't always say the same things. And sometimes if something is hard, I can't say it verbally. It gets stuck, or I'm too intimidated, or I don't want to make anyone upset. And this is when I asked her to explain why she needs AAC, because this is someone who has verbal speech and can have, such good verbal speech that in the right moment, when the moon and stars align, you wouldn't necessarily identify her as having a disability. Her articulation was perfect. Her language was great. But this is someone who constantly, what she explains is that as soon as she knows that there's a right answer expected, that all kinds of things go off, and it's so distressing and it's so anxiety producing that she cannot use her speech to do exactly what she knows she's supposed to do. And this was also kind of a career changing moment for me. So when we say kids do well if they can, what we mean is that children want to do well. They want to be an integral and accepted part of their social structure, as do adults, whether that's family or school or teams. And this is from a blog piece I give. That this is what we know, is that it is very, very, very rare. And it can happen, there's personality disorders, but it is very rare that we have an individual who truly seeks harm or seeks to not connect, almost always people, they want to do well, they want to succeed, and they want to make you happy. So this came from Linda K. Murphy's Declarative Language Handbook, and I think it was a really, really helpful quote for me. When a child doesn't do the correct action within a few seconds, this is labeled as non-compliance. But here's the thing. Demands can trigger or activate the fight, flight, freeze response. I think this is what's happening all the time. I think it even happens, with myself. When people ask me certain kinds of questions or give me certain kinds of directions. And if someone, does any of those responses, they fight, they bolt, or they freeze and do nothing, we can tend to incorrectly interpret that they don't care, when it might be that they care a whole lot and they're just freaked out. So changing the words you use every day, that's a big ask. And this is a challenging presentation for me to do because I know what the world is doing. And I know that what I'm suggesting is a really big departure from the way we do things. But I have some, I don't know. I feel better because if I could do this, if I could shift my language, I've been a therapist for 30 years and I was doing it this way. And many of the things that I was explaining that we shouldn't be doing, I was doing them, all of them. So what should I do, you might say? Like, gosh, where would I even start? So this is really a call to action. I still mess up sometimes. I think it's really important to know that if you start working, and I'm going to start giving you some examples of how to rephrase, you will not be perfect. We have been doing this our whole lives, where this kind of authoritative, give a direction, ask a question, test. This is what we've been doing. It will not completely go away. There will be things where you realize, I asked a question. But I'll give an example that when I am working with a student, I will ask questions. Well, what color do you think this is? I still do it because it's something I've done my whole adult life. But what I have changed is my requirements of that communicator. So, and this is the biggest thing, is that we have to really think about what we're requiring. So we need to be using declarative language. And here was this is an access to a video. We don't have time to watch the video, but this was a really nice video kind of explaining declarative language. I'm going to play this one for you. Let's hope this.
This is a real life example of how to use declarative language with a PDA child. So this morning I was making my son's lunch and I noticed his
Right. Before we start with that, she says a PDA child. What she means is a child with demand avoidance, which many, many individuals who are on the autistic spectrum and with other disabilities have a really strong reaction to anything they perceive as a demand. So don't worry about her calling it PDA, but just kind of listen to her example.
Tupperwares from the day before were completely full. So I went over to him, and what I would have said before is, why didn't you eat your lunch? Right? But instead I said, I noticed you didn't eat your potato chips. He said, I don't like them. I said, okay, I can give you popcorn. No, I don't like popcorn. I can give you pretzels. Yes, I want pretzels. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm switching to declarative sentences. I can do this. I notice this, instead of direct questions like, what do you want to eat? Or imperatives, you have to eat your lunch, right? And both of these examples were preempting the threat response by not allowing the child to lose autonomy.
So That's Casey Ehrlich, who I follow on Instagram. And I think that she does a beautiful job of providing examples of how she rephrases something. And a little bit of background on her. She's a clinical psychologist. She has a child who is autistic, or at least on, neurodivergent, and struggles significantly with any kind of demand. And she has learned to kind of rephrase and restate and redo the way that she talks to her child, just to really help him develop his language, help him want to interact with her. And she shares all of those tips. So Casey Ehrlich is a great one to follow. We only have a few minutes left. This is something that I think is really, really important, that we don't think about. And it's kind of heading back to that empathy part where, put yourself in their position. I think we're so stressed out that life is so hard and we have so many responsibilities. And then we're faced with the challenging situation of supporting someone who has a lot of struggles communicating, that we miss the fact that the way we talk to them and the way we talk about them really, really can cause significant challenges or trauma or damage. Not that we ever mean to do that. I'm certain that I've done that in my lifetime. But this is from Sarah Moore. She says, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And then she's like, wait, yeah, they will. When people feel emotional pain, the same areas of the brain get activated as when you feel physical pain. So words matter to our brains and our bodies. And I thought that was a really, really helpful kind of way to look at it. So, in 1 hour, I really wanted to give you an introduction to look at this. This is what you're probably doing. I know I was doing it, and I still do. I have to catch myself. But there are ways to kind of shift. So if you were saying, say chip, you might shift to, oh, I see a chip. That makes me hungry. And then when you say chip, you might tap chip on their communication device or on their communication board or whatever they're using. But you're not saying, say chip, tell me chip. I want to hear chip, say it again. Instead, you're saying, oh man, that chip looks good. I know you usually like chips. But then not moving forward and requiring a response from them. This is the biggest thing I think that gets us into trouble, is that we make language a task. And again, they know there's a right or wrong answer. So this was an example of a podcast episode that you can refer to with Linda Murphy, where she goes into a lot more detail about examples and how to do this. But what I really wanted to do was kind of set the mindset change of like, oh my gosh, what we're doing all the time, it is headed in probably a direction that we don't want to do, that we should be really starting this challenging but powerful shift. So it's time to retire instructional practices or interaction styles that don't foster empowerment and exhilarated moments. So we want to be focusing on, oh, I noticed that you did, like, be positive, be exhilarated, be energetic, all of those kinds of things, and you will get it back. It's pretty amazing. So declarative language is also, let's see, 53. Okay. So declarative language is also something that many people with either cognitive impairment or, who are neurodivergent or, all kinds of disabilities, they may need the explicit nature of declarative language. So you are saying, if you say, what color is the sky? you're asking a question, you're testing them. If you change that to declarative language, and you said, "Oh, I see this. I see the sky looks beautiful. It kind of it looks blue to me." And then you stop there. You do not say, "Tell me what color the sky is." It's that point where we shift to making them do it, which often sends them running or behaving in a way that is challenging for us. So always start in your head. Wait, was that a demand? You will do it all the time in the beginning. And this was not a course in exactly how to do this, but it's really, this is the start to really changing your mindset and thinking, wait, there may be a better way to interact. It may be the way that I interact and I've watched everybody else interact. Maybe that is not providing the best support for my language learner. So this was a chart that Linda K. Murphy posted, and she talked about less direct statements and more direct statements. So all of these are statements. So this isn't questions. This isn't carry a bag inside. It's, oh, mom is carrying heavy bags. But what she learned and what the field has learned is sometimes they need even more information. Why is she telling me that? Mom is carrying heavy bags. I think it'll help her a lot if we hold the door open. I'm happy to do it, or you could. So what you're seeing there is you are not placing demand on them. You're providing a lot of explanation of the why, of the what you need and the why, but it's in that moment, they don't have to do it. And what I find is tremendous change. I had a student, Gavin, who wouldn't really do anything because little did I know that everything I was saying sounded kind of like a demand to him. But when I started changing, so for example, if I brought a new activity when working with Gavin, it used to be that, oh, look, I brought this game. It's so cool. Do you want to play it? The answer was always immediately no, even if it's something that he really was interested in. And what he was responding to was my question. It was too much stress, caused too much anxiety, not doing it. So a perfect example is I played with Gavin with an iPad app that was art-based that he really liked when he worked with me. I told mom about it. Mom said, "Oh, well, I told Gavin, I asked him if he wanted me to buy it for him, and he said no." And I said, "Well, think about this. Just asking him if he wants it, maybe sending him into anxiety. I have to do this. I have to say the right answer. So maybe say instead, oh, I heard from Miss Lauren that you really like that app. So I downloaded it on your iPad. It's on the second screen. You can check it out if you want." But then being very, very careful not to say in that moment, "Okay, let's go look, let's do it." Always kind of make certain that, have I ended on a requirement or a request? And if you have, then that's the thing to work towards next. So I'm hoping that this is kind of starting to shift, make you think a little bit about a really, really, really big challenge, but a really, really, really effective and rewarding, and I would say life-changing in many cases. That once someone feels validated and that you really want to talk to them and they feel listened to and they don't feel pushed or demanded or directed or corrected, I've seen dramatic life changes. And students who are 19 have never had communication, and suddenly when they feel heard and they feel listened to and they feel not pressured, develop all kinds of language, become much, much, much more competent AAC users. But even beyond that, so Morgan at 19 was not potty trained. But it turns out she didn't have the language to explain that she had to use the bathroom. So once we got her comfortable with using augmentative communication, not right away, it took some time, it took about 2 years. But eventually, it was something we were able to represent in language and talk about and not test. And she was able to accomplish that, which is changes the lives of herself and her parents. So I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for hanging in through this kind of challenging conceptual discussion because it's a real departure. But I'm sharing it because I know you can do this, and get out there and just start trying. You will make mistakes. That's okay.